Hi everybody, thanks for joining me. In this lesson, we're going to go over a basic overview of Fiedler's contingency model of leadership. Now, before we get into the model in too much detail, I want you to imagine a situation. In this situation, I want you to imagine that we have a baseball player. And it's very important that we get the best performance out of this baseball player that we can. But unfortunately, for some reason, we've taken this baseball player and we've put him on a soccer team. Okay? So, first thought here is, well, how do we teach this baseball player how to play soccer? They're two very different sports. How are we going to take the skills that are aligned with baseball and convert them to this other sport? But what if instead of teaching the baseball player how to play soccer as we try to get the best performance that we can out of him, we just put him back on a baseball field and let him play baseball? Okay? In this situation, instead of changing the person and changing what the person does, we're looking to change the person's situation so that they're in a situation where they can be successful. And if you understand this concept, you understand the most important concept related to Fiedler's contingency model. Okay, so Fiedler started by having leaders fill out a least preferred coworker questionnaire. And the idea behind this questionnaire was that leaders would indicate who they'd like to work with and who they wouldn't, and that by filling out this questionnaire, it would give an indication as to what the leader's orientation was. And there were two different types of leaders that Fiedler looked at. The first one was identified as task-oriented, and task-oriented leaders were kind of controlling and structured in what they did. And then the second kind was relationship oriented. And these leaders tended to be a little more considerate and passive in their leadership approach. And what Fiedler said was that a task oriented leader would not become a relationship oriented leader, and that a relationship oriented leader would not become a task oriented leader. The idea here was that if we wanted these leaders to succeed, we had to make sure that we put them in the right situation to succeed. So let's talk a little bit about these situations. Fiedler argued that there are good situations for leaders and there are bad situations for leaders overall. Okay, and when it came down to good situations, Fiedler said we need to have good leader-member relations. Okay, so employees need to they need to trust their leader, they need to believe in their leader, and if they do, we're going to have good situations. But if we have bad leader-member relations, we're going to have bad situations for leadership. So asking the question of do employees trust and respect leadership is very important to identifying this. And if they do, then we have these good relations and our leaders are going to be in good situations. And if they don't, we have bad relations and our leaders are going to be in bad situations. And what Fiedler said is that this is the absolute most important component to situations that we're going to put our leaders in. After that, Fiedler said we have to ask the question of do employees know what they need to do and how to do it? And if they do know what they need to do and how to do it, refer to that as high task structure. Okay, and as you can see here, what Fiedler argued was that when we have good leader-member relations and high task structure, that's going to contribute to the best situation that we can have for our leadership. Okay, now if we look at the opposite end of the spectrum, you'll see we can have low task structure and bad leader-member relations, and that's going to contribute to the worst situation that we can have as a leader. So now that we've looked at the extremes, we'll fill in the middle and we'll combine low task structure with good leader-member relations and high task structure with bad leader-member relations. So again, while we're looking at essentially a two-way interaction here, the good leader-member relation, low task structure situation is a little bit better than bad leader-member relations and high task structure because our priority, again, our most important component to the situation is leader-member relations. All right. So the final question that Fiedler said we need to look at in our situation is, does the leader have authority? And if the leader has authority, that's what we call strong position power. And according to Fiedler, when we have good leader-member relations, high task structure, and strong position power, that's going to be our optimal situation for leaders. However, when we have bad leader-member relations, low task structure, and weak position power, that's going to be our worst situation for leaders. Now, position power, of the three different situational components that Fiedler discussed, position power was conceived as the least important of the three. So we'll fill out the rest of our blocks here, but as you can see, there are some situations that have a few more negative components than others, but are still favorable situations because of good leader-member relations. All right, so as we look at this, one of the things that we'll think about is that you would expect that as we go from a good situation to a bad situation, you would expect to have more positive positive situational components on the left than you would on the right. So we're going to add up how many positive situational components we have. So when we have good leader-member relations, high task structure, and strong position power, that's going to be three different positive components. Then one column over to the right, we have 2, and then we have 2 again. But what's interesting here is as we get to this fourth column, we only have one positive component to the situation. We have the good leader-member relations. Okay, then we're back up to 2 again, down to 1, 1, and 0. So if you're not all that familiar with Fiedler's contingency model, this can seem a little bit strange that a situation that only has one positive component to the situation would be preferable to a situation that has 2 positive components. But you have to remember that Fiedler said there's kind of a ranking order to these components to the situation, and that leader-member relations are the most important. So let's take a look at this and think about a ranking order, and let's assign points to each one of these rows. And we'll say good leader-member relations are worth 3 points, high task structure is worth 2 points, and strong position power is worth 1 point. So now we're going to go through here and we're going to add up how many points we have in each column. So as we look at the column all the way on the left, we have good leader-member relations would be worth 3 points. We have high task structure would be worth 2 points, and strong position power would be worth another point. So that's going to give us 6 points total for that column. And then we go over one column and we've got 5 points, and then 4 points, 3, 3, 2, 1, and 0. So when we go through here and we rank the components to the situation, we kind of weight them as we add them up, we actually do have that linear functionality that you would expect going from good situations to bad situations. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to look at here is we're going to look at what types of leaders perform well in each of these situations. And what Fiedler argued, and there's some support for this in the literature, although there is some conflicting evidence as we go through here. But what Fiedler argued essentially, and what the research has shown in a lot of situations, is that on the ends here, task-oriented leaders tend to perform better than relationship-oriented leaders. And the idea here is that over on the right here, the task-oriented leaders are providing the structure that employees need in order to feel confident and be successful. And over here, things are pretty good for the most part, and the task orientation is really just helping to make sure the processes flow as they should. Then in the middle, where we have kind of some less favorable conditions, that's where relationship-oriented leaders really shine, because they're able to help employees through some of these less favorable conditions in the middle here. All right. So as we move forward here, remember, if we're in a situation and we need to improve the situation, we need to not change the leader, but we need to change the situation that the leader is in. So imagine that we have a task-oriented leader, and they're over in this position where they have bad leader-member relations, high task structure, and weak positional power. Okay, so this not only trends towards the bad situation for all leaders, but it also trends towards the area where a relationship-oriented leader might be more effective. Okay, so we want to look at if we could change one thing here, what might happen for this leader. So there's a few different things that we could do. Okay, we could change from high task structure to low task structure, and that puts the leader over here, which is a task-oriented position. Okay, we could change from weak position power to strong position power, which puts the leader in a better situation, but it's still a situation where a relationship-oriented leader is more likely to be successful. Or we can put the leader in a situation where they have good leader-member relations. Okay, and that puts them over where they have a good situation and they're more task-oriented. All right, so we would tend to probably eliminate changing from a weak position power to strong position power situation, because it doesn't change the situation that much, and it's still an area where the task-oriented leader is not likely to be as successful. Okay, we also probably would eliminate changing from high task structure to low task structure, because that just creates a worse leadership position overall, and that's not what we're looking to accomplish. So the best thing that we could do here as we try to take the task-oriented leader who was initially over here and put them in a better situation would be to focus on changing leader-member relations. Because if we can change from bad to good leader-member relations, we're much closer to a good situation, and we're also in an area where task-oriented leaders are more likely to be successful. Okay, now we can also have situations where, say, a relationship-oriented leader is in a bad situation, and in a situation where a task-oriented leader is more likely to be successful. So here, what we have is we have a relationship-oriented leader. They're in a situation where there's bad leader-member relations, low task structure, and weak position power. Okay, this is pretty much the worst situation we can have for leaders, and it's also one where task-oriented leaders tend to be more successful. So our three different options that we can have here are that we can focus on trying to change the position power, because if we can get to strong position power, we're in a little bit of a better situation, and we're also in a situation where relationship-oriented leaders more likely to be successful. If we can change from low task structure to high task structure, again, we're in a little bit of a better situation, and again, a situation where relationship-oriented leader is more likely to be successful. Or if we can change from bad leader-member relations to good leader-member relations, now we're in a situation where we are really trending towards the good situation, and it's still an area that is favorable for leadership, for relationship-oriented leaders. Okay, so obviously we're gonna kind of trend towards the spot all the way to the left, because all three of those positions were appropriate for relationship-oriented leaders, but we want to put our leader in the best situation possible. Now, one of the other things that we want to consider as we move through and think about Fiedler's model here is what happens when we have a relationship-oriented leader and they're in a situation like this that we just put up on the screen. So they've got good leader-member relations, low task structure, and strong position power. So ultimately, it's a pretty decent situation, but it's one where a task-oriented leader is more likely to be successful than a relationship-oriented leader. This is a situation where we wouldn't necessarily want to change something. We wouldn't want to put ourselves in a worse situation just to get into that relationship-oriented leader box. So we do have to think there are kind of some imperfections here in Fiedler's model that we need to walk through. In summary, a few of the things that I want you to take away from this lesson are: one, we want to focus on changing the situation, not the person, according to Fiedler's model. We want to change the environmental factors around us, because we can't change the style that the leader is going to embrace. We also want to prioritize situations, leader-member relations being most important, followed by task structure, and then position power. And we also want to make sure that we recognize that there's not absolute support for this model, and there are a few areas where the intuition behind the model is not all that strong. However, having said all of this, Fiedler's model is still a pretty good basic model that we can use for some nice insights into leadership and how we can put leaders in good positions to succeed. So thanks for joining me for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something, and we'll talk to you soon.